in continuation with the Mughal discussion on the Mughal Empire. We have already discussed about Babur, his political achievement. We also have made some observations on Humayun, and we have put up some emphasis on the administration of Sher Shah Suri. This was basically done because of the fact that Sher Shah Suri is considered to be a forerunner in developing an integrated state in medieval India. That was the reason we have put some emphasis on the administration of Sher Shah Suri. Now, coming into the details and focusing on Akbar and his times, we will have to divide the period of Akbar into 3 to 4 perceptions. The first perception will be trying to understand Akbar as an imperialist. The second perception will be trying to understand Akbar as a liberal ruler who contributed to the development of a liberal state in medieval India and had contributed immensely to the cultural growth and development. I have a portrait of Akbar showing you. I'll also show you a slide which shows Akbar and Jodhabai. This is an indicative of the fact that Akbar had put a lot of emphasis on his relations with the Rajputs and tried to make the Rajputs a contributory force for the development of the Mughal Empire. This is a slide which is showing the vast empire of Akbar, which was divided into different subhas during his particular period. Now, going into certain details of Akbar's early career. Akbar was born, as I had mentioned, Akbar was born when Humayun was in exile. His mother's name was Hamida Banu Begum. She was an Iranian lady whom Humayun married during his wanderings. When after his defeat with Sikandar Shah, Humayun runs to Lahore, and when he does not get any kind of a support from Lahore, he runs to Iran. And it was at this particular period that he meets Hamida Banu Begum and has a child with her, and that child turns out to be Akbar. And in the year 1542, at Amarkot in Sindh, as already mentioned, Humayun died, and Akbar was only 13 when Humayun had died. Akbar was only 13 years old and was under the guardianship of Bairam Khan. Bairam Khan was in fact a kind of a foster father for Akbar, and he was under the guidance of Bairam Khan. Humayun had appointed Akbar as the governor of Punjab. At the time of his father's death, Akbar, along with his tutor Bairam Khan, was in hot pursuit of Sikandar Sur of Punjab. After he receives the news of the death of his father, where Bairam Khan celebrated the coronation on 15th February 1556, and he himself becomes the regent. So that's a brief introduction of the early phase of Akbar, where he went on, he was at a very young age, he becomes the emperor of the Mughal Empire. In the initial stage, he acts as a governor under the tutelage of Bairam Khan, and eventually in the year 1556, he becomes the Mughal Emperor. The political conditions. Now, let us just see the political conditions on the eve of Akbar's accession. Akbar, to a large extent, was able to control at a very young age. He was able to control the conditions that were prevailing politically in the Indian subcontinent. If you just look at I'm showing you a empire of the Mughal Empire under Akbar's control. But if you can see, there are 4 distinct geographical regions. One region which is covering Afghanistan, Pakistan, etc., touching almost the borders of Iran. The second region which is showing northern India, touching areas like present-day Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh, Punjab, Bengal, etc. And the third region showing the South India, or which we call the Deccan, where you have independent kingdoms like Gondwana, Ahmednagar, Golconda, Bijapur. You also have the polygars, etc. So this was the condition when you just try to understand on the eve of Mughal accession to the throne of the Mughal kingdom. The Mughal kingdom that was established by Akbar was compared to even the Bourbons Empire in France, where after the downfall of probably the Guptas, no other empire was able to bring about such a kind of, I would say, a centralized power. No other dynasty was able to establish such a kind of a centralized power, extending almost from the borders of Iran down to the borders of Bijapur, Golconda, and the polygars. So this kind of an imperial unification, which you see in the map, you have to have a centralized power which could, which should enjoy the loyalty of the people who were in control of the Subas or the distant regions. The greatness of Akbar lies in the fact that he not only was able to integrate such a kind of vast empire, but was also successful in contributing to the development of a liberal society, and which had put a liberal society which had put emphasis on cultural integration. This is what makes Akbar a very important ruler, where he depended on the strength of military. He had an idea of state, and he also believed that a cultural integration can only contribute to the development of a liberal society and economic prosperity of the kingdom. So, with this kind of a backdrop in mind, let us try to understand the expansionist. See, when I say expansionist, I will not hesitate from using the word imperialist. Akbar was one of the greatest imperialists in the medieval times. The kind of the map, when you just look at the map itself, the extensiveness of the empire itself is an indication of the kind of imperial ambitions that he had. When I say imperialist, I am not using the word imperialist in the modern 19th century context. I believe I'm using the word imperialist as only an expansionist, where he felt the need of a strong, powerful empire, a vast empire, a centralized empire with a kind of a bureaucratic setup, a liberal society, and cultural advancement. This is what is making the Mughal Empire distinctly different from other empires of the contemporary times. Now, when we just try to look at it, how was this possible? How did Akbar achieve in doing this in the medieval times, when the means of communication and other aspects of travel were not all that advanced as we find it in the modern times? One of the main forces on which he depended was the strength of his army. He organized his army in such a way that they were maintained actively throughout the year. At the same time, they were also put in such a situation that they would be loyal to the Mughal Empire. So if the loyalty was absent among the provincial leaders like the Mansabdars or the others, then this would result in regional, provincial, political ambitions. One of the main objectives of a strong empire is that it should enjoy the loyalty of the provincial leaders. Akbar, to a very great extent, was successful in achieving this. The vastness of the empire is an indicative of the kind of loyalty he enjoyed both from the bureaucratic elements and the provincial controllers of the vast empire. Now, taking a look into the conquest of Akbar. Akbar, as I said, was a great imperialist and wanted to make himself the supreme ruler of Hindustan. He wanted to make himself as a supreme ruler where there will not be any kind of a regional independent kingdoms, and the vastness of empire should itself be a threat to other regional independent kingdoms. This was a kind of an idea. See, one thing I would like to mention here is Akbar had a clear conception of what a state is. And this was absent in most of the medieval rulers. We will discuss more about the idea of Akbar's state after we try to have an understanding of the political conquest and the phased manner in which he had taken up these political conquests. But here, before we go into the political conquest of Akbar, I want you to know very clearly that he had a very clear idea of what expansion and how expansion is different from the idea of state. And that is the reason we call the Mughal state a non-theocratic benevolent state. A non-theocratic benevolent state. I say non-theocratic because a state, when it is ruled strictly in accordance to the principles of religion, it becomes a theocratic state. The primary sources of administration for a medieval state have been the Adiyas, the Shariat, and the Quran. Akbar had not depended excessively on these three primary sources. He had a conception of state, and based on his conception of state, he tried to develop. Why he becomes an important ruler is when you just look at the map, the extensive, the vast empire he developed, right from touching the borders of Iran down to the Bijapur, you can find very clearly that this philosophy of developing a liberal state in the medieval times to a very great extent was achieved. He strongly believed that when you differ with respect and not with contempt. So, going back to Akbar's conquest, Akbar, as I was telling you, he was a great imperialist, and some of the historians also call him or address him as a national builder, where, there is a kind of a debate, ongoing debate, whether Akbar had conceived the idea of a nation or not, but the kind of liberal policies and the kind of emphasis that he put on the Rajput integration into the imperial Mughal service are very indicative of the fact that he definitely did have a conception of state and made all his efforts in the process of nation building. So, in the first phase, let us concentrate on the political conquest that Akbar has taken up in the northern India. As described, or as explained by me, Delhi and Agra were conquered as a result of the Second Battle of Panipat in the year 1557. So the two battles of Panipat have relative importance in the history of medieval India. While the first battle of Panipat in the year 1526 had put an end to the Delhi Sultanate Empire, the second battle of Panipat in the year 1557 had established or becomes a cause for the establishment of the powerful and extensive Mughal Empire in the Indian context. There is an argument about which I would like to make a reference here, that do battles change the course of history? When we look, sorry, when we look into the Indian history, there are three important battles which have changed the course of Indian history. The first battle of Tarain and the second battle of Tarain have changed the course of Indian history and became the cause for the establishment of the Delhi Sultanate. Similarly, the first battle of Panipat and the second battle of Panipat have been battles of bringing about changes in the course of history. These two battles, the battles of Panipat, become the cause for Mughal expansion in India and establishment of a powerful Mughal empire in the Indian context. So, after the second battle of Panipat, we find Sikandar Sur taking refuge in Mankot or surrendering, and then pretensions of the Sur family, which were trying to claim back Delhi and its empire, and come up with a claim over a claim of sovereignty over the Hindustan empire, have come to an end. This battle is also important because of the fact that this battle puts an end to the Mughal contest and puts an end to the Afghan contest and Afghan claims over the Hindustan domains. So the second battle is important. The second battle of Panipat is important from two perceptions. One, bringing about a change in the course of Indian history. Two, putting an end to the claims of the Afghans in the Indian contest that they had a right over the domains of the Hindustan provinces. After that, between the years 1558 and 60, Bairam Khan, under the tutelage of Bairam Khan, Akbar had expanded his empire to the areas of Gwalior, Ajmer, and Jaunpur, and you can see these places in the map that I have put up in the slide. Okay, in the year after that, in the year 1564, Gondwana was overrun and conquered by Asaf Khan. Gondwana formed the northern part of the present Madhya Pradesh. Gondwana is a region which is a part of, most part of the northern regions of present Madhya Pradesh. The brave Rajput queen, Durgavati, it was being defended by the Rajput queen, Durgavati, was ruling over this particular region, and the regent or son was Bir Narayan. Sorry, the regent of her son was Bir Narayan. She was a very brave lady, wise and capable woman, and ruled over her country with wisdom and ability. Most of the Rajputs, they were the indigenous forces, and most of them had a clear understanding of the political, had a very clear understanding of the politics of the region, the geography of the region, the economy of the region, and they had a genetic ambition to rule over these regions. When Akbar's force attacked Gondwana, Durgavati offered a brave resistance near Jabalpur. So the forces, as Akbar was an imperialist, he wanted to bring Gondwana under his control or make Gondwana a part of his Mughal empire. And this brave lady, this brave queen, had put up a contest in and around Jabalpur. When all hope was lost of winning the battle, she stabbed herself. That shows the Rajput chivalry and bravery, and the kind of a militant force that Rajputs were, and the strength, the bravery with which they had defended right from 8th century till the establishment of the Mughal Empire. They had defended these regions. See, this is a very important event, bringing Gondwana. It is not only speaking of the Mughal ascendancy over the Rajputs, but it is also speaking of the withering away of the Rajput resistance against the formidable Mughal forces. So you have Rani Durgavati stabbing herself and considering it as a death of honor, and her son Bir Narayan also died in the battle fighting against the Mughal forces bravely. As a result of this important battle, the entire region of Gondwana in the year 1564 becomes a part of the Mughal Empire. Then, after Gondwana, there were a series of Rajput states which fall in line and to after some resistance fell to the armies of the Mughal forces. Akbar's ambition to make himself the most powerful, unquestioned, glamorous ruler does not stop here. He wanted to become the paramount king, the paramount lord of India. And the motivation for this attack, this was the motivation for his attack in the year 1567 over Mewar. Mewar was one of the most important Rajput states. Gondwana and Mewar, these two were the most important. They were, what should I say, they were the areas where it was very difficult to defeat the Rajput forces. So after defeating the Gondwana region in the year 1567, Akbar puts his sight on Mewar, and Mewar was a premier Rajputana state. The next state was Chittor, which was, Chittor was the capital, not the next state, I mean. Chittor was the capital of the Mewar state. Here you have Rana Uday Singh. Rana Uday Singh, who was another formidable Rajput ruler, who is also the founder of the Udaipur city, the present Udaipur city, and was also the head of the Rajput Confederacy. I mean Confederacy, the group of Rajput small independent states. And he was the ruler of Mewar. Although several Rajput chiefs, several Rajput chiefs had submitted to Akbar after the fall of Gondwana, several Rajput chiefs had submitted as they did not have the ability, the military strength or the ability to fight against the Mughal forces. But Mewar and Uday Singh did not fall in that line. There was another Rajput ruler, and he was Raja Bihari Mal. Raja Bihari Mal of Jaipur had given his eldest daughter to Akbar in marriage. He had given shelter to Baz Bahadur, the fugitive of Sultan of Malwa. Okay. On this pretext, in the year 1567, Akbar marched against the Rana with a large army, well equipped with a contingent of artillery. Rana Uday Singh, unable to face the attack, entrusted the defense of the fort to his brave commanders, Jaimal, Pata Singh, and he himself retired to the hills of Himachal Pradesh. Jaimal and Pata Singh fought bravely against the Mughal forces and were eventually defeated. And then the important fort of Mewar goes into the control of the Mughal Empire. Uday Singh died at the age of, Uday Singh died after 4 years, after an age of 15. And after this, the Chittorgarh or Chittor was another important fort, which was under the control of Rana Pratap Singh. And Rana Pratap Singh, for a long time, relentlessly fought against the Mughals, maintained a hostile relation with the Mughals. But the fate of Chittor was sealed and it never recovered from its fall. So Chittor was another last important Rajput region which falls to the Mughal forces. So when you come down, you have in retrospection, when you just look at, you have 4 important Rajput states which have fallen to the Mughal Empire. That is Gondwana, Chittor, Mewar, and Malwa. So these were the 4 important regions, and this region, after the success of the Mughal army over these regions, the Rajput resistance to the Mughal forces literally comes to an end, and the Mughals were successful in establishing their supremacy over this region. The other forces, or the other forts that fell in course of time to the Mughal forces explain the line of continuity of the Mughal Empire. So the invasions or the expansionist policy of Akbar continues. In the year 1569, Ranthambore and Kalinjar, when I'm referring to these forts, please look at them in the map. The 2 important, another 2 important states, that is Jaisalmer and Kalinjar, they also submitted to the mighty Mughal Empire in the years 1569 and 70 respectively. And after that, the Raja of Bikaner also surrenders and makes his submission explicit. This gives an opportunity for Akbar to negotiate with the Rajput rulers and make up or develop some kind of matrimonial alliances. Some of these Rajput rulers who were defeated gave away their daughters to Akbar in the form of marriage. This established strong relations between the Mughals and Rajputs, and this also paves the way for Akbar to come up with an idea of integrating the defeated forces of Rajputs, who were a positive force, into the Mughal service. Okay, the same year, Jodhpur also submitted, and after that, he becomes the entire master of Rajputana, complete Rajasthan and its surrounding areas, and Rajputana, what we call the areas of Rajputana, come under the control of Delhi and Ajmer becomes the headquarters of this particular region. Most of the Rajput clans, except those of Mewar, submitted to Akbar. So the only state, that was left was Mewar. And most of them became the followers and devoted soldiers of the Rajput warrior clans. Mewar was the only state which was trying to still hold itself, and the Rajput soldiers who were not interested in joining the imperial service. Some of the Rajputs had joined the Imperial Mughal services, but others who were not interested in joining the Mughal services went and became the followers of the Rajput warriors in Mewar. So there was still some resistance in coming up from the Rajputs in the region of Mewar. After trying to subdue the Rajput forces, Akbar concentrates on Gujarat. Gujarat and Bengal are two important regions. So you have him concentrating on Gondwana, then you have him concentrating on the confederation of the Rajput forces. Now his attention turns to Gujarat. Gujarat was a very rich and fertile province. There was a lot of trade. Most of the trade with the medieval East was being carried on from Gujarat. So from the economic point of view and from the political strategic point of view, Gujarat was very important because it had several flourishing ports, not forts, ports, P-O-R-T-S, ports. And most of these ports were natural ports. Akbar was anxious after Rajputana. He becomes anxious to annex Gujarat. Muzaffar Shah III was there. He ruled from 1562 to 1572 in Gujarat, and he was a nominal king of Gujarat, I will say, a nominal king of Gujarat. In the year 1572, Akbar invades Gujarat. Akbar invades Gujarat and Muzaffar submits without any kind of waging a war or coming up with any kind of a resistance. Muzaffar submits to the mighty Mughal forces. Akbar settles him down for a small pension. So, after the submission of Muzaffar, Gujarat comes under the control of Mughal Empire, and a pension is given to Muzaffar, and he is asked to withdraw to the regions of Surat. I think so. It is Surat. Yes, around Surat they withdraw, and Mirza was besieged and captured. That particular region was captured by one of the regent of the Mughal Emperor, Mirza, in the year 1573. That is, the annexation of Gujarat becomes complete. And as the annexation of Gujarat becomes complete, the income of the empire and the trade of the empire also increases. This is basically because of the fact that, as I'm telling you, Gujarat was a trade hub. Right from ancient times, it was a trade hub, and most of the trade with the Middle East was being carried on from this particular region. And after Gujarat, Kangara, if you can see Kangara in the map, Kangara becomes a feudatory. Feudatory is a vassal king. He becomes a feudatory of the Mughal service. So the entire of Gujarat comes under the control of the Mughals. Todar Mal, after this, Todar Mal, one of the Rajput members of the the Rajput Confederation, who was very efficient in maintaining and running the revenue of the Rajputana region, was given and entrusted responsibility of revenue, and he becomes the revenue minister, and a stable settlement of revenues in Gujarat was achieved. So Gujarat had become important from two perceptions. One, politically, because of its trade and commerce. The second thing is the revenue that was coming from Gujarat had to be settled. So Todar Mal was given this responsibility, and Gujarat becomes an integral part of the empire, Mughal Empire, where a kind of a political settlement and revenue settlement was achieved by the Mughals by the year 1575. Then comes the contacts with Portuguese, and the contact with the Portuguese affected Akbar and his empire in many ways. That we will discuss at a later stage. But now we will concentrate on Bengal, another important region. I just referred Portuguese, but because this was the time when Portuguese had come in contact with the Mughals. That we will discuss at a later time. But now, because we are trying to have an idea of the political unification of the northern Indian regions under Akbar's rule, we are trying to understand it one by one. We have seen Gujarat, we have seen Gondwana, then we have seen Confederation of Rajputana, then we have seen Gujarat, and now we are trying to understand how Bengal comes under the Mughal Empire. Suleiman Karmani was the Afghan king of Bengal when Akbar was the ruler in Delhi. Formally, he acknowledged when, after the defeat of Gujarat, when Akbar turns his attention towards Bengal, Suleiman Karani, who was the ruler of Bengal in this particular period, he accepts the suzerainty of the political suzerainty of his Akbar, but his son Daud Khan, refused to submit Akbar. He refuses. The father accepts the suzerainty of the Mughal ruler, but the son refuses to submit and proclaims his independence in Bengal, in and around Bengal. So, in the year 1574, Akbar leads an army against Daud Khan, and Daud Khan was defeated in 1575, and he flees to Orissa. At last, Daud Khan was killed in a battle near Rajmahal in the year 1576, after which Bengal becomes an empire, an integral part of the Mughal Empire. So now we are left with Mewar. So Gujarat was completed, Bengal is completed, now Mewar was left. In the year 1576, one of the most important battles is the Battle of Haldigati. Haldigati was a pass near the town of Gogunda. Rana Pratap was defeated by Man Singh. So Man Singh was appointed as the general of the Mughal army, and Man Singh was deployed to defeat Rana Pratap, and Man Singh was successful in defeating Rana Pratap in the Battle of Haldigati. Man Singh was representing the forces of Akbar, and Rana Pratap was representing the confederated forces of the Rajputs. So this was the last resistance of the Rajputs against the supreme Mughal force which had emerged by 1556. The Rana, he leaves the strongholds of Mewar, goes to the areas of Kulaimanar, and which also passed into the hands of the Mughals. But before his death in 1597, Rana recovered most of them, these small regions. So the resistance was continued, though he was defeated as a king of Mewar. He takes control of some of the forts in Rajput area and Rajasthan area, and in the confederation of the Rajputana, and comes up with resistance against the Mughal Empire up to his death. After the last phase of the Rajput resistance, Akbar sets his ideas on the regions of Kabul, Kashmir, Balochistan, and Orissa. These operations take place between 1585 to 1595. So this is the second phase of the Mughal expansionist policy in the North India. So we will continue in this particular phase, or we will try to understand this, what should I say, conquest of Kabul, Baluchistan. We will link it up with the Deccan policy and try to understand the completion of the expansionist policy of the Mughals under Akbar. So in conclusion, we have seen a major part of the expansion that had taken up that was taken up by Akbar under the Mughal rule. We will continue with the northwestern provinces, and we will also see the Deccan policy. But before that, I would like to say that in spite of the continuous conquests that were going on in India under Akbar from 1556, he was successful in establishing, I should say, a liberal society where his Rajput policy, his religious policy, his attitude towards Hindus, all this become contributory factors for the emergence of a liberal society. And he also had put up an emphasis on cultural integration. So in the retrospection, when we just try to look at Akbar, he was not only an expansionist, he was not only an imperialist, but he also believed that for the success of an empire, socio-economic and cultural integration should take place. We will continue with Akbar in our next class.